Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Co-Creating Your Ultimate Playbook for Organizational Change Management Success with Allen Interactions. We are on Zoom, which you're probably all very familiar with.
Which is so funny because 2 months ago, what is an unheard of word, right?
Right, I know. Yes, that's absolutely right, Lisa. Lisa's going to be moderating for us today. So I just have this slide up here so you can see just kind of where to find your audio settings. They should be in your lower left-hand corner. And then your view options, you can do something with the side-by-side mode if you check that. You can see both because we'll have Lisa speaking and Dr. Bars. So if you want to see them side by side, you check that. If not, if you just want to see who's speaking, you can have that unchecked, and then you can obviously mess with your Zoom ratio. There's also some phone dial-in information as well if your computer audio is not working for you, but you can do those adjustments through your audio settings, test your speaker and microphone, and etc. there.
And Carrie will repeat all of that.
And I will repeat all of that again. So just getting it out there once. Please make sure you have your chat panel, from all panelists to all panelists and attendees. We're going to be using chat a lot. We really want to be hearing from all of you. This is like a group effort. So please, like if you're there, if you joined, just shoot in there, where you're from, the usual, what the weather's like. That's always like the main topic of conversation. It's gloomy here today. I'm in Southwest Minnesota. Yep, Lisa just asked.
And it's finally sunny in Minneapolis. So
is
yay.
it?
Yes.
That's nice. It always brightens. It does do something, when you have the sun shining.
And many of you are probably running to the restroom or grabbing coffee because you're coming from different meetings.
Yes.
But otherwise, once you get a chance, yeah. Yeah, probably another Zoom, no doubt about it. Cleveland, welcome, Tracy. And I think our Dr. Bars is from the Cleveland area, or not from there, but was there a long time. So she'll probably mention that throughout. Joe in Long Island, awesome, 60 degrees, can't beat that.
Yeah, it's 61 here.
Oh my gosh, the lights are still out at the Wills Tower in Chicago from the flood. That's crazy. Oh, parents.
Paris. Oh, I want to come. I want to go there. I want to go there someday so badly.
So Grishka, if you need someone to come visit, Carrie's your helper.
Oh, it's cold there. Oh no, that's Celsius. No, is that the same?
That's Celsius.
That's Celsius, so that's different. Yeah.
And I can't do the conversion for you.
I know. I need to know. So thank you for joining us today. This is the webinar, Co-Creating Your Ultimate Playbook for Change Management Success. We're just going over, so if you want to make sure you change your chat settings on your panel from all panelists to all panelists and attendees. And then, oops, this is touchy.
Maggie, hi. Sorry, Carrie, I saw a client on there.
Yeah, no, totally. And then audio and view settings. You guys are probably all very familiar with these, but with the Zoom platform, but your audio settings, your computer audio, the phone dial-in is there if your computer audio is not working.
Awesome. And keep letting us know in the chat window. We'd like to keep a really active chat window today. And you'll hear a lot more about us co-creating this playbook, but it's really going to be a lot of good input from you guys. So keep the chat going. We're starting with pretty light questions now, like where you're from and the weather, basic things. So just love to check in with anyone. And thank you, Grishka, for the conversions, 85 degrees. Perfect.
Oh, that's very helpful. Oh, it's nice there. It's supposed to get to 80 this weekend, so that's going to be exciting if it happens. Memorial weekend is always that, lots of times the weather isn't super nice on Memorial weekend. A couple years ago, it was like really nice. It was like in the 90s. It was really crazy. And then join us on Twitter. We'll be tweeting, we're doing some live tweeting. Since this is really about co-creating, it's about what we're sharing with you, but also what you're sharing with us, because you guys are the ones in the trenches every day. So we'd like to just see your face. If you want to tweet a picture, if you feel comfortable doing that, or just anything you learned from today, you can use that hashtag crowdsource change. And we're at Custom eLearning. You want to get into this question?
Perfect. So as we're, obviously today's going to be a lot about change. You're going to hear a lot of things going on. We have some great information to impart. And then as Carrie mentioned, of course, we want all your insights too. But just how's everybody, you know, we want to check in personally, right? I know we're all busy and lots on our plates work-wise, but how's everybody just doing personally? How are you coping? If you have any good coping tips, we're always open to those. But just how's everybody feeling? We'll talk about, you know, the grief, different things, different phases of change. So how are you feeling just in general in life right now? Just let us know. Just want to do a personal check-in. Ooh, Napa, awesome. And a couple more joining. If you're just joining us, we're trying to get the chat window alive and running, so feel free to join us.
Yep. Back to the, I'm going to go back here. If you're joining us now, just making sure to check your audio settings. If you can let us know in the chat if you can hear me okay, and if you can hear Lisa okay. Just say yes or no would be great. Tom, thank you, raising your hand. You can raise your hand, tell us, yep, we hear you. Good, we're loud and clear. Good, thank you for that.
Perfect, and we'll get started in about a minute. Let us know where you're from and how you're doing, and if you have any great coping techniques you want to share with anybody, we're definitely open to that.
Feeling good. Yeah, I work from home too, so that part of it was not a big change for me. The big change for me was trying to be some kind of teacher to my 4th grader while working full time, which was we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Friday, he's done. So 8 weeks has gone actually really fast. Just make sure you change your chat settings because we'll be using, as Lisa said, we want this to be very interactive, engaging. We want to hear from you guys. This is about crowdsourcing, about co-creating this playbook for change management success. So please switch from all panelists to all panelists and attendees.
Yeah, Maggie, absolutely. Great observation from Maggie that it's weird having your family looking into the way you work every day.
My son actually said to me, I feel sorry for you that you just sit there all day. I mean, you know, like at my desk, like, you know, he sees me sit at my desk all day and I'm like, I'm working. Awesome. I just thought that was just a cute, innocent observation from a child.
Oh, awesome.
Again, we're on Twitter, so if you want to join us on there, share any insights from today, that would be great. Hashtag crowdsource change. We're at Custom eLearning.
And we'd love to see pictures. We always love to see your work environments, your pets.
Yes, pets, anything. Yep, love to see those.
Steven's enjoying working from home for the first time. Steven, do you think you'll ever go back to the office if you have the option?
I know, I think some people got the taste and they're probably
really
liking it, liking the flexibility, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah. Maggie loves it. So Carrie, I think we're at the top of the hour. I don't know if you want to...
Yep, absolutely. So thank you everyone for taking time to join us today for this webinar on co-creating our ultimate playbook for organizational change management success. We did one like this, how long ago that was now, right when the whole pandemic kind of started, and we did it on remote work success, co-created a playbook, and that one was really successful. So I decided to do this one on change management. We have a wonderful expert here with us to do that, and Lisa here to moderate. I'm Carrie Zenz with Allen Interactions. Allen Interactions does a lot of things from custom learning, developing meaningful, memorable, motivational learning experiences to digital engineering to strategic consulting. We have an Allen Academy where we teach people effective instructional design, and then we also do government work as well. So we are going to kick things off here. I wanted to just touch on this picture because I'm really big into kind of analogies. And when I saw this, I was like, we kind of went with this whole butterfly theme because, nature and change just go hand in hand. They really do visually give us that like direction of like, this is, change is so visual and so real. And this caterpillar is like kind of where we all were, not that we looked exactly like the caterpillar, but we were going along in life. And then this pandemic hit us and we all had to change our lives. Things got shut down, put on hold, quarantine, self-isolation. So kind of like going into that cocoon or that chrysalis. And now things are starting to open back up and states are releasing the restrictions and things are kind of going back to a normal, but not completely a normal. I mean, I think that our world is forever changed, but we still have to emerge as this butterfly. And we need to find these strategies and techniques and tactics to navigate this new normal, because I don't think things are going to go back to completely the way they were before. And so we are here to work with you. We need you and us to work together to build this playbook so we can soar and so we can really find our way with, building that empathy and trust and compassion with our organizations and our people, who are our most valuable assets. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Christina Coiticus Bars. I might have not gotten her name right. I've struggled with that, but she is our HR learning and organizational change management expert. She has been in the trenches. She has led and taught a bunch of organizations in organizational change management. She has helped motivate leaders and guided them, to embed change in their organization. So we are super, super excited to have her here. And alongside her, we have Lisa Stortz, who you've been hearing from, who will be helping moderate this hour. She also works for Allen Interactions as a solutions architect. And so I'm going to turn things over to Lisa.
Perfect. Thanks so much, everyone. I really appreciate everybody joining. The biggest part of this session today is not only Dr. Barr's vast amount of knowledge, but really the input from you. The output of today is we're going to actually create a playbook. You're going to get it following the session. So all of your input that we get off the channel today, the back channel, anything in the chat window, that's all going to be included. So we're super excited for Dr. Barr's to share her insights and for you to give us your input. And in case you're wondering, we did measure and all these people are absolutely 6 feet apart. So everybody is social distancing in that picture of you. We are so thrilled to have Dr. Christina Bars with us today. I've been with Allen 16 years, and we now have a change management expert. This is her world. She's spent careers doing it. She's worked with a lot of great companies, and I've learned so much just even prepping for this webinar. So with that, let's just get started. I know we're using the analogy. Carrie teed it up. And Christina, you want to tell us a little bit about the analogy?
Sure. So on your screen, you'll see a lunar moth. Actually, on Saturday morning, my husband came in. I was going for my yoga certification because I'm always learning, and said, hey, look at this. Look what we've got in the backyard. It's huge. So we went out and it was about 5 to 6 inches large. And Sweater Vest Sal, one of our Boston Terriers, went out to go and sniff it, and its wings got even bigger. And it was really fascinating to take a look at it. And what lunar moths stand for are change and big changes. And you could never expect the amount of changes that we're going through right now with COVID-19. And earlier, Carrie and Claire had talked about the new normal. And I think really what we're experiencing and what we're going to talk about today is the newest normal, because it's always changed. And we're going to talk about how change is now recursive as opposed to linear, and different tools that we can use. And I may be an expert, but I'm not going to be the sage on the stage today. What I want to be is your guide on the side to help you and to gather that information so things are meaningful for all of us.
Thank you so much for that. And our agenda today kind of follows how the playbook that you'll be receiving after this goes. So we're going to go through a high level, just as leading change. What does that involve? What does that involve before, during, and after. And Dr. Bars is going to share a lot of great information on that. And then we're going to get your input. And then we're going to talk about competing priorities and then when change fails. And with that, we're going to dive into some models just at a high level, and in the chat window too, Dr. Bars, people are putting in the change management models they're using.
That's great. I'm taking a look and see a lot of ADCAR coming through here, ProSci, which is fantastic. So ProSci is actually the name of the company that owns the intellectual rights to ADCAR. And Cotter, excellent. VUCA. So one of the things that you'll notice is that we'll be talking a little bit about all the different, there's so many different change models. And what's important is that your organization has chosen one to create a common language across your system. So that as people are moving through change, because change is emotional. It's, change could be about processes, systems, structure. It could be about a lot of things, but really when you boil it down, it comes to how do people feel and how do we connect their hearts and minds to the mission, vision, and purpose of your organization. Because once you've connected that, they're going to build that trust and they will follow and they will help things stick and make things. So one of the things that we want to do is in those types of change models is today we're going to kind of start at the fact that we think everyone has a change model and then talk about what are the ways or things that we're doing at each one of the buckets. So, if you think about Kubler-Ross and that change curve of, so you hear something, you're in denial, you go to resistance, then you go into exploration and into an acceptance. One of the things that we're going to talk about is the before the change, the 3 time-bound buckets, before the change or right when you find out changes happen to you. So for example, you can know that an ERP is being implemented or a new service line is being added. Or it can be something like COVID-19, like, hey, Monday, you're starting to work from home. Not a lot of time to, prepare, right? So we're going to start with before, then we'll be doing the during, like what happens during the change, that secret sauce. And then the after, how do we sustain the gains of change? And there's 2 other things we're going to talk about today, which I really like, which is the competing priorities. When we've done webinars before, one of the questions that comes up a lot of times is how do we handle multiple changes? How do we take care of that? And that's really something that happens a lot in organizations and you get change fatigue. And then another one, though sad, but does happen when change fails. So those are like our 5 things we're going to talk about today. Now, I thank you. I absolutely adore you, Carrie, because you've been trying to catch up with me talking. If we can come up to the spiral change model that we had, because one of the things is that with change, the way it's happening right now, it's not completely linear. The way things are so dynamic right now that even before you get to the point of acceptance and implementation, another change is happening. That's what I'm talking about. It's no longer the new normal. It is the newest normal. And it's not something that's a new concept on spiraling or recursive change. Here's a model right here that actually was designed when analyzing software and how software changes were and how an organization learned to build on their knowledge. And really, it's actually as elegant as a plan, do, check, act. You plan to do something, you do it, you check where are you at, you act, and then you modify. So just continuously honing it so that the organization builds on that tacit knowledge and then becomes cohesively better at accepting the change and modifying and moving forward. The next slide is the OODA Loop. So one of the, in the blog post that we have, and also we'll include this in, and a lot of the information about all the different change models in the change, the ultimate change playbook is the OODA Loop. And the OODA Loop is actually, again, it's something that was created in the military, and it's to help, you can actually bolt this onto other frameworks, and it's about adaptability. And I really have to say that adaptability is your superpower when it comes to change. Flexibility and adaptability as a leader and seeking to cultivate that with your direct reports. So it's basically, observing, reorientating, deciding, and then going back and having that feedback loop constantly. And we'll talk a little bit more as we go into during, before, during, and after.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And as Dr. Bars mentioned, we'll definitely be including all these in the playbook. She did an awesome matrix of the different change models that I think you'll find very beneficial. So with that, why don't we go into the meat of it?
So we're going to
Leading
go
change
into the,
before.
yes, change before.
So the way she set this up is fabulous. There's a checklist at the beginning, and you'll see that in the playbook too. And then she's going to impart some knowledge, and then we're going to ask for your input. So again, keep the chat window alive. It's over to the right. If you're having any troubles with the chat window, please just let us know, and we'll help you on the backside.
Thank you. I just want to, I see in the chat, Jennifer, that, yeah, ad card is really a beautiful and very, very elegant model. The problem is that sometimes people boil it all the way down to doing a checklist and thinking that you've got everything done. And we're going to do a checklist right now. So, right. So in the before part, let's level set and see, where are we? How are we doing in your change for before, just when you heard it? So here's a couple of things that we should be. Complete a culture audit. Have you completed a culture audit? And that's basically understanding where you are and how a readiness audit. Establish a governance structure. I think right now, with so many changes that are going on, having a governance structure or a change management committee is really important. Engaging all your stakeholders, really doing part of your culture audit and your governance strategy is really understanding who really is being affected by the change, and then documenting an implementation plan. That's why it's so important to have a model that your entire organization follows and having similar language. Creating a communication plan, have you created that? And a plan for training and educating your leaders at all levels. And that's even for your leading the way for your executives. Do they know how to be a good executive champion? Do they know how to remove the barriers or to have those conversations? So level setting just before you're going into the change, or when you just find out, hey, everyone's working from home on Monday, going through and saying, what do we have and what don't we have, and what do we need to do to actually help us shore ourselves up so that we're best positioned to move forward into the change and support our organization. So enough about me and what I think you should be thinking about. What are your insights about when you hear change is going to happen, or it's just happened? What are some of the steps that you may take in your organization, things that have been successful or things that you find that are concerns?
So please go to your chat window and let's share with everyone. Things you do before, some of your concerns, maybe some of your challenges, anything that's working. Chris would like to know why we are and where we are. So more contextual relevance to the challenge and the change.
That goes to your communication, the big why. Why is it valuable? What's the value proposition? Goals, excellent. Thank you, Dennis. Yes, uncertainty. We're going to talk a little bit more about that.
And Maggie mentioned the why. It seems like the why of it all.
I think that, again, it goes back to building trust and an emotional connection. You want people to trust the organization and to risk. And we're going to talk a little bit more about behavior changes and the psychology behind behavior changes.
And Christina, the sustainability, and then from Christine, I love the execution network. So Christine, if you can put a little more in the chat window about an execution network, that'd be great.
That'd be fantastic. I'd love to hear more. Like that, about what's the level of acceptable risk. Now that goes to the adaptability superpower. How much are we willing to give up? How much are we willing to lose? And also that gives you that conversation about what your flexibility level is. Again, one of the things about change, people do not, the three things. Yesterday I did a live stream at LinkedIn with Christopher Allen, and he asked, like, where do organizations have problems with change? And one of them is that it's an emotional thing and it's about loss. People forget that change is about loss. Even when something good is happening, you're letting go of something, the past, what you felt comfortable with. So having that, what are those risk mitigators? What are the things that may be pushback or resistance that will help you go through that during part?
Perfect. Thanks so much. Yeah, and Earl commented on that too, about losing even the good parts of it. Awesome.
Great.
Okay.
So while we please keep continuing filling in, because the more that we receive from you, the thicker the book is and the more holistic it is. So that's what we want. So as your guide on the side, one of the things that I would highly recommend as a way to coach your managers or your frontline leaders in helping your direct reports or your frontline or individual contributors make the change or adapt is thinking about that neuroscience, about what it's like to create a psychologically safe environment. Now, we hear a lot about psychological safety. I just finished writing about secondary stress syndrome, which is, you have PSD, of post-traumatic stress syndrome, and people at the front line of COVID are experiencing that. But then you have the ripple effect of secondary stress, which is, again, like we were talking about, what's the level of acceptable risk and how are we going to handle that? Well, as we handle the newest normal of what we're going through with COVID, is creating those psychological safe environments, those ways where people can adapt and feel like they can fail and fail fast, but that it's like a forgiveness, a compassion, and the ability to say, hey, we're in this together and we can move forward. So Lisa, I know you really love the SCARF model. It's based on David Rock's in 2008. I'm going to do a shout out. I know she's not on this, but Allison Arkin, when I worked at the Cleveland Clinic, was the one who turned me on to SCARF. And what's great about SCARF, it really talks about putting yourself and walking a mile in the person's shoes, like regarding status, what is your relative importance to others? Certainty, as some people put in here, the uncertain parts of change. What are we willing to give up? Autonomy. How do we allow our people to feel like, how much do they hold for the decision? How much are we giving and imparting them in trust? Relatedness, how well people feel like they belong and they feel safe within the environment. And then fairness. And I went further on SCARF in the example for our playbook about how do you apply it to change. But I'm going to take the ball and I'm going to volley it over to you, Lisa. And would you like to add a little bit about SCARF here?
Yes, I was just recently exposed to SCARF through the ATD in Minnesota. So I think it's a great tool. We'd love to host a whole nother webinar on it if you're interested. If you're using SCARF currently in your organization, please go to the chat window and let us know. If you're not and you're interested in learning more about it, we would love to host a webinar on it. What I like about it, like any assessment, right, it just gives you some tools to let you know, hey, I'm okay. Exactly where I'm at. I have a better understanding of where I'm coming from. I have a better understanding of where my colleagues are coming from. So yes, good. Heather would love to learn more about it and others would as well. So perfect. We'll get one teed up. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Let's move on to during.
During. So now what we're talking about again is like we have a high level checklist really to find out how are we doing at the during part. Understanding where we are in the context will help drive our decisions, how we guide and advise people within our organization. So one, are we clear on the leadership expectations and support? Has an implemented training plan to help? What is the training plan? A lot of times people think of training as, ding, now that you've taken this training, you're capable of doing everything. But if you think about training in multiple methods of modalities, there's computer-based training, there's instructor-led, there's job aids, there's right time to the right person, there's QR codes that can be placed strategically at point of use. There's so many different ways that you can use learning to leverage the cultural change or the support and even the emotional change. I think in the ADKAR model, they talk about knowledge. Do your people have the knowledge to be able to have the abilities to make the change? That's where learning is so important. And understanding on the work progress aligned to performance and mindset changes. You have a plan to install consequences to reinforce changes. Again, I think that went back to, what risk are we willing to take? What is and how do we allow people to be more autonomous? With this whole work at home and the social distancing, a lot of things have happened. There's been some really great articles recently about the autonomy of the workforce. That workforce is now working more and more independently. Well, that's why it's important that when we're handling change, we're going to handle change a little bit differently to help people grow, develop, and learn and develop and expand their skill set at their self-paced manner, that they can do self-directed learning. And then, does your approach include a model for individuals experiencing the change? Now, why I'm asked that is because change happens at two levels. You have the strategic change, or your strategic plan for change across your organization. This is at the top level of the organization, looking really at the tops of mountains, and how are we going from mountaintop to mountaintop? How are we making these large scale changes to achieve our strategic goals for the organization? Then you have your tactical plans on how you cascade that information all the way to the front line, and also radiate it out to your clients. So when you're doing a model, you can have your change model, like your ad card, your Cotter, your you're using Kubler-Ross. There's all these, Ken Blanchard, all these different types of models. However, the thing is moving the hearts and minds of people and having them absorb the change, make conscious decisions, and take their knowledge and also the emotion and feel trusted to move forward. So that's one of the parts about that. I'm going to stop and let you all add for what are you doing during change? What are the things that you found that have been successful, or some of the challenges that you have for during change?
And thanks so much for that, Christina. The chat window has been very active with that. Some that have been brought are that you can address. Maybe our ownership is a big piece, and then being a visual part of helping with the change, you know, being the buy-in, and then communication. So if you want to tap a little bit into ownership, being a visible part of the change, and communication.
Great. So being a visible part of the change for leaders, I think, is really important. I remember there was in business school, when I was going to business school, there was MBWA, which is management by walking around, you know, and that's really was basically getting out onto the shop floor when I worked in manufacturing or in healthcare, going out into the hospital floors and connecting with your frontline workers, showing that you have that active listening and being able to connect. And to pulse check, you know, using humble inquiry to understand where they are and how they're processing. Because what we're telling people and how they're processing the information could be, you know, there could be cognitive dissonance. So how do we help and do that without coming down? And then one of the things is that MBWA, what we want to prevent is management by wandering aimlessly. Now, I noticed that some people were talking about the big changes that people are now, you know, home, and they're not even out on the road, or they're not able to, you know, be those road warriors. I saw that. And how do we do that? How do we do manage by, you know, by walking around, or manage intentional connection with everybody to see how they're doing? You know, what are some ideas? And that's the part of thinking, you know, how do you connect? For example, I'll use when we were in Hurricane Harvey in Houston. Now you talk about changes happening to you. We had started to prepare, but then we had to paddle upstream to be able to survive, and also support the organization for orientation and our classes. So as we figured out how we were going to communicate with our new hires, we had over 100 people starting for new hires. The other part too was, how do we change the way we were doing business? So what we did as a, you know, as a leader, because it was important for me to be visible for the team and also create that emotional connections, that we had a daily touch base, and everybody called in at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we just did a quick check and see how everyone was doing, what people were doing. And one of the things I remember was that one of our employees actually called when he was in the attic of his house because his house was flooding, and we were telling him to get up on his roof so that they could rescue him. But the idea is that,
Wow.
how do you, you know, talk about humbling, but the idea is that being visible through the change, through a meaningful text, through quick conversations, through emails, that's really important. And understanding it's not just, you know, coaching our leaders to be doing that from the C-suite level all the way to, you know, the director level, that literally getting people out of their offices. Well, now that we're all home, is connecting other ways to make a decent connection. I hope that helped. groups.
Yeah, I think that's great. And there's a lot of really good information in the chat window. I think that human connection you mentioned is, just check in with people at the start of every call. How are you doing? How are you coping? Where are you at? How are you showing up so that people know that it's a safe space? Because it's such interesting times. A lot of good feedback in the chat window. One was brought up. Christine, can you go a little deeper in the consequence? You mentioned the consequences of things during. Can you kind of give us a little more insight on that?
So consequences are, and the only way that this works where it's positive, because, you read consequences and you're thinking it's punitive. And, if you don't do this, you're not going to be with the organization. It goes back to your communication plan, your why, a compelling story. I think that goes with Cotter talks a lot about that, is having that, or Simon Sinek talks about why. What is the reason for doing this, and then explaining what the consequences are. And I remember seeing what people had about the goals and being really explicit on expectations. So consequences can be, as we have certain KPIs, key productive indicators, that are required for us to be able to be successful. Or if this change is implemented, we're going to open capacity to be able to see these many patients. Or we're, by doing this particular ERP rollout, we know that we're going to be able to, save so much money in resources and cut down lead time. But you still have to measure that to make sure. So those are the consequences. And talking about consequences is then also being able to hold safe space to have conversations when those consequences are not those consequences, or when we do not hit those goals. I think it's really important that we're clear with that. It could be also with, like, for example, with changing or reinvigorating your values for your organization. How the consequences may be, or you're creating a new customer service recovery program. Well, where do you implement that? You could just roll it out and tell everybody about the customer service recovery program, but the consequences could be that we're still not improving our customer satisfaction scores. Embedding that change into the performance management program that you're doing, your annual performance or quarterly performance management, seeing other indicators of how you can measure not only your business indicators, but also gathering data in other ways, like pulse surveys, annual performance reviews, stay and exit interviews, and getting that information so that you can understand what the consequences of your change are.
Great. And a couple great points are coming across on the chat window. One is on asking more pointed questions and being very direct with the communication. Excellent feedback for us, because even at the beginning of this, we're like, how are you doing? Not very specific. We probably could have, hey, what are you missing most during these times? What are you really missing, or things? Lydia had some great points about how they're doing weekly check-ins, Tuesdays and Fridays. Tuesdays, creative brainstorming. So, let people be a little more free, and Friday, show up, tell stories with kids and pets. So love that. Dr. Bars has horses and dogs and cats and apparently salamanders now. So she would love joining that session as well. Awesome.
That we had a sad salamander. It was a sad one. But you're right about the pointed questions. One of the things you want to do when you're asking very clear questions is to make sure that they're open-ended, so that people, when and they're not leading, to make sure that when you're asking those questions, you're really hearing the voice of your direct reports, so that when you're asking a specific question, and to be brave at asking those pointed questions, because sometimes you're going to hear things that may sting a bit, but rise with it, take that information, and then be able to respond to it. You may not be able to respond in the moment, but collecting that data and then being able to help to turn that around, giving them that voice and letting them give you valuable information is really important. So that's a wonderful, wonderful point.
And a lot of good feedback about the whole water cooler virtual breaks, right?
Yeah.
That you missed that.
Excuse me?
Oh, the whole water cooler concept. People are saying how much they miss the whole water cooler, just having casual check-ins, virtual coffee breaks. So people are doing a lot of that, which is awesome.
Yeah, those, and I love those. I've done a couple of virtual happy hours too. Those are
I think we'll be doing one right after this. Oh,
yeah.
awesome. And Andrea brought up possibly using the word impact instead of consequence, right? Because it just doesn't, we're being bombarded, literally with life and death right now. So anything to kind of help restore that would be great. Well, why don't we move on to some of the ABCs, more of the specifics, if you want to hop to that, Christine?
Sure. So, and I do agree, word choices are very important. Like when you're talking to people, there's positive psychology. I know I'm going a little step back here, but you're right about the impact versus consequence. Instead of saying we need to do this, it's required, because need almost push it's a thing you have to do it. You have no choice. But understanding that it's more of an invitation and that it helps us to succeed, to make that positive impact is really important. So word choices are incredibly important when communicating. So as your guide on the side, I'm going to talk a little bit about the ABCM, or the Allen Behavioral Change Model. Now, the Allen Behavioral Change Model focuses on the emotional and subconscious mind for human decision making. And it's really where the magic happens, where we get the change of behavior because of the knowledge acquisition. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through now. One of the things is, please know that I think Claire is going to put in a link, because there is actually a very, very well written white paper about this model, and it's incredibly thorough, very enlightening. And I'm going to do this in like 5 minutes, and we could actually do an entire webinar on this and on behavioral change. So what I would like to do is, and of course it should be done by Dr. Allen, because this is his brainchild. So the first part of the ABCM is you'll see the little ball where it's safety. Now remember, at the beginning of this, I talked about how change is lost. And sometimes even when things are good and you're making another good change, you're still letting go of the past, letting go of what was your morning, what was, as we start to go to what can be. So that's the first part, is, that safety. And what you want to do is to create that compelling communication so people will want to make those changes. So the phase one is, as you'll see, the ball has gone to the precipice of intrigue, and we're going to start rocky and rolling. And when, change can be scary. And creating and moving from that safety point, that calm and that comfort level. And we're asking people to go into that uncomfortable. And really, what you may have been reading this, that not right now, it's becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's going to be a common theme as we go through from the new normals to the newest normals. So we want, intrigue or desire to know more. What we're trying to do is get a pull from our learners, as opposed to pushing the information out. In the Toyota production system, they always talk about how you don't want to push employees or push people to do things. What we want them to do is to want, or to desire, and to pull, to learn, because as they do it voluntarily, they're going to ingrain it much more. So we're just about ready to do that slide into learning and go into phase two. So in phase two, during the learning phase, which is, diving deep into the unknown territory, requires trust and confidence in the organization and into your senior leader, and knowing that we're going to give you the tools to do your job. You know how one of the Gallup 12 is, you're going to have the tools I have the tools to do my job. So one of the things is that ability. Phase three is new interests. So when the learning is effective, sparking curiosity and desire, they want to learn and learn more. Okay, so how many of us go on to Google something on the internet to learn, how do they do this? So you start to look up, Lisa, we've done this, right?
What's a Lunar Moth? That's what I did.
Yes, on the Lunar Moth, right? First you want to, what's a Lunar Moth? And then you start to read and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Now, they're indigenous to this part of the country. What part of the country? And that's the part of self-directed learning. What we want them to do is to continue to want to be like human sponges and soaking it up and getting new interests and understanding more. So that's the part of phase three and the new interests. So as we go into phase four, we're talking about the successful application of that knowledge. It's the commitment. Now, commitment can be a bumpy road because it's little short steps. This is like a lot of quick iterations as people learn, as they go from that unconscious incompetent, we don't know what we don't know, to conscious incompetent, oh my gosh, I don't know this, to conscious competent, I now know this information, how to apply it, to unconscious competent. It's like riding a bike. I didn't even know that I didn't know this before. So it's that bumpy road. And it's best to take those little steps. Then we go into phase 5, and that's action planning. So making the magic happen, the application of the learning, the reinforcement of the learning. And then phase 6, and today with the quarantine and physical distancing, and like we know about that tension of not being together, and that we're learning very much how social support is so important. So with ABCM, we're really talking about how do we have that social support, how are we helping people to care and to know that they're cared for. In Maslow's hierarchy of need, that's the belonging step of the pyramid, that I belong, that I feel like I belong, and that I'm valued. For in Gallup, when they talk about the different things, someone has asked me how I'm doing, or asked me about my career, or has talked about my learning, or has invested time in me. I'm botching the Gallup 12, but you know where I'm going with that. So what's important is that in that social support, we create another way, or around a cocoon, so to speak, of being able to create that social support. So again, very quick, very high level. I've just scratched the surface of the ABCM model, talking about, meaningful, memorable, and motivating, as Dr. Allen calls it, the 3 M's of how to connect with our people and help them move forward. So I'm going to stop there. And
that was fabulous. And Claire did put the link out there, so we encourage it. It'll also be part of the playbook. Again, I want to reinforce all this great feedback you're giving us in the back channel window. All of that's going to be included in the playbook. So you're going to have a playbook, within short, maybe 48 hours after this webinar, where you can go to your leadership on change management. You can bring new ideas. This was all crowdsourced in the industry. So again, thank you for all your active participation. Really good feedback. Dr. Bars, if you have a chance to read Catherine's comments in the window, really good information on that, on the lateral communication and letting leaders, even internal informal leaders, lead, right? And not necessarily have a formalized leader or supervisor kind of hovering over that. So let's move on to after, and then we can always circle back to those comments. What about some things we can do after change? And is there such a thing as after change, or is that a misnomer these days?
Right now, like we said, it's just when you start to think that you're getting there, you have to change. And that's really perfect about the informal leaders, understanding who are the people that have the ear of your teams, who are the people that people go to and trust, and how do you get them to become change advocates and to help you make those changes and support those changes, and also be that ear to let you know when things aren't going right. So for after change, so you've done all the good work, things are starting to go, and even if you start to have additional changes, when you start to have hit a milestone, it doesn't have to be particularly after the change, it could be a milestone during the change, but understanding where you are progressing as an organization or leading that organization. So planning ongoing reinforcement of the new ways of working. How is the change on the leadership's radar? How are you monitoring those changes? Like, for example, in one of the institutions, we created an executive onboarding dashboard because there were problems with bringing people onto the organization. And about month 4, the wheels started to fall off the wagon because they were learning from a fire hose. So we looked at the process, created a dashboard, and then we're able to track our people, measure, and it was able to roll all the way up to leadership. So giving them, thinking about not only doing, but how are we communicating our progress? Evaluation methodology to measure change adoption, whether it's saturation, heat maps, etc. How are we understanding where are we making progress? And it's a change culturally embedded. So one of the things is thinking about, I talked a little bit about this earlier, is that when you're doing change or you're creating something that's new to the organization, how committed are you? And how much are you going to move that Queen Mary of a ship? And make sure that it continues. Because a lot of times when change is done, we talked about this, a lot of times change is done and people are like, wonderful, we just went through that service recovery model. yay, move on to the next thing. And there's always a next thing, right? And sometimes you're not even finishing with that, something new happens. But when you're planning your change, thinking about what is your sustainable system that's going to help embed it into the DNA and keep it going and periodically check it. And talking about a multiple phase training program, because you could train the new people, you could train the new thing, but how are you embedding that training into when you're orientating new people? How are you reinforcing that? How you have people like we just talked about in the model, people want to learn more and more and more. How are you creating tiers of information so people can grow? Your informal leaders can then gather more information to be even more effective. So those are some of the things about how are we doing. So I'm going to stop there and see if anybody has any questions.
There's some great things in the background too. Maggie talks about that they're trying, when they're rolling out new software, they're trying a change toolkit. So every time it's more institutionalized and you can learn from it, which is awesome. So just really good input. I can't thank everybody enough for being so active in the back channel. Very helpful. Lots of good comments. And also, if we're not getting a chance to address you specifically in this, we're happy to follow up with you after too. It's one thing about Allen Interactions. I love the learning never stops, right? Whether we're learning about Lunar Moth or change management, right? We're always here to learn from each other. So I think we're good moving on to the next portion.
That's great. And one of the things is that what I'm talking about is like, again, on your guidance side is using different types of techniques is an after action review. So an AAR, and those are used in military or in emergency situations to unpack what has happened, gather the information, and then be able to, as we said, that plan, do, check, act, like gather the information. How do we make it better the next time? Or how we talked about that spiraling change. So an after action review in other industries may be called a post-mortem or a hot wash. For example, and it's 5 questions. So what is working well? What is working not so well? What might we stop doing? What might we start doing? And what might we continue doing? So 5 questions. I can run these in like 45 minutes. And one of the things that really incredibly powerful, for example, that was working in another organization, and we had just worked with we had a client, we had a vendor, and they were supposed to help us with a particular change in the organization, and they fell short. And what we did was we then took, I had talked to the CEO and I said, sometimes when you don't get what you want, it tells you what you don't want and what you don't want to happen. So let's unpack that. Let's use an after action review, find out what worked, what didn't work, what do we want to stop, and continue, and then use that to indicate a critical, an analysis, a critical to get a new vendor. So again, we learned what didn't work. We're learning about what can work. We're getting a closer focus on where we're going. And that 45-minute process, you can run it as a survey. You could do it as a facilitation. You could do it as a focus group, but it's very, very powerful. I think, Anna, I see how you're saying about some of the biggest changes you have is codifying changes in performance management process. What we've done is use like the AAR after an annual review, or collecting the data and analyzing it, seeing trends across the system. So there's lots of great things.
And Jason had some good feedback on that as well, on using them. So very delightful. Thank you for that. Perfect. And we try to use the same thing with our clients after projects as well, so that we can learn from it. And, what's that magic wand to do it all over again? So perfect. Shall we move on to competing priorities? Because that's the name of the game these days for sure.
Oh, yes. And, like I said, when we did this, we did a very similar crowdsourced for your remote worker playbook. And when we did that, we had about 300 people that were online, and the information that we gathered, and one of the big things was like, how do we handle competing priorities or, change fatigue? So that's one of the problems that, especially if you're in organizational development or process improvement, that sometimes you're going to you're charged to go out there and to do a change, and people are just like, really? And feeling like it's a flavor of the month or an issue. So how do we get things without sounding like everything is important? So let's go to how are we doing? So how are we doing on competing priorities? So do we have clarity around the different change initiatives and the current programs? And do we have a mechanism to review those multiple cultural impacting events and data collection? So one of the things is that we found has been really great is you take a spreadsheet, it's Excel, and you just list out everything that is happening at that moment, calendar wise, from, what are the things that happen every year? Is it annual performance reviews? Is it the engagement survey or a pulse survey? Is it the culture of safety questions? Is it the, the new electronic medical record or ERP? Or some new process. And when you start to overlay them, you get to see where the pain points are. This visual representation helps you to be more purposeful in making those shifts, and also helping your leaders give people the idea of what is the priority take. Everything's important, but for right now, what is the priority? And then, also collecting data on resiliency, burnout, and change fatigue. A lot of organizations now, I know Prescaney has added the Stanford model of, measuring burnout and change fatigue, and using that as a way to understand, pulse check what is happening in your organization and helping them to move forward or to mitigate the risk of abandonment. When people become burned out, oh my.
You okay? Did you just
Yeah.
become burned out?
My screen, I'm sorry. That was just like,
that the fake
I was
freeze?
like, oh my. Well, my whole screen went, and it just like went, and I'm like, no, but it's okay. I just had to click on something and it came back. So this is good. I didn't like disappear into the ether, but that was one of the things that's competing priorities. So let's open it up. Oh, I like a visual of a pie. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think what is good about that one too is they're taking something off. For everything that gets added, is there something you can take off? And I think we can all push back a little bit with our leaders and as leaders of, hey, I'm happy to do that, but what's coming off my plate in order to do that? The other one, Mary Jean had some good questions about accountability for the line of business leaders, that's often, maybe a gap. So what are some ways you can get the frontline of business leaders to be more accountable? So if others have ideas on that too, please go to the chat window on that.
That's perfect. Yes, especially accountability. That's a hard one. Try defining accountability without using the word accountable. It's a tough thing to define. It's one of those things that when someone's being accountable and holding themselves accountable, but how do you get people to feel like they're being accountable? And it's walking your talk and modeling the behavior. And again, it comes to being very clear on what the expectations are in measurement, rolling out a succession planning program, and understanding, communicating what the expectations are, but also explaining what you're going to be measured of for success. That's one of the key pieces. And I love the fact that somebody asked about accountability, because what gets measured gets done. What are the things that people are being measured are going to be the things that they're going to do. The things that they're not measured on, they're going to let go. So understanding what is important and what's being measured will help with accountability, and being very clear in that expectation of what it is. If you cannot explain what the expectation is and define it, how can we hold people accountable? Or how can we expect people at the front line to hold others accountable? So it really gets into being very crisp on what the expectations are, and then giving them those tools to be able to have those coaching conversations. Lisa, you and I were talking about the drama triangle and how we use that. That's a perfect way of explaining to people about victimology and rescue behavior and persecution perception, and how do you help people understand where they are and then flip and create a stable environment. So again, that comes with helping people become compassionate in their feed forward. That's a Maxwell concept of being feed forward, and helping them make that adjustment to move forward. So yes, accountability is huge. I think Covey that did a whole book on accountability?
Yeah, there's been quite a few, but definitely he did. And it was so interesting getting ready for this webinar with Christina because we probably had 20 more sessions than we needed because every time we'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm really into that too. So go to the chat window too. Let us know if you're familiar with the drawing triangle. If not, we'd love to host an upcoming webinar on that as well. It's something we're working on with some of our current clients and love it. So with that, should we move on to guide on the side?
Okay, so one of the things about when you're having competing priorities is that it's an unstable situation. There's a lot of uncertainty, it's ambiguity. People feel like, where do I go next? So the idea is that as a leader is to create that feeling of stability. So establishing routines, rituals, or team habits, just like you guys were just talking about earlier, like having water cooler talks or celebrating, I think there was a toast to success,
Yeah.
and having those conversations, those Tuesday creative brainstorming and Friday connections, creating that is something the brain really craves consistency. So when you're creating that, it gives them a sense of certainty and encouraging your team to invest in themselves. That's another piece of development. You notice that when we were talking about going back and working from home, people were talking, it was a big conversation on LinkedIn about how do you people develop themselves? How are you, invest in your time, read some books, watch some TED Talks. With that change that's happening in your organization, you can easily create playlists. And a playlist is a list of information that's open source that they can go again and self-direct. Some TED Talks, some podcasts, some articles, and just really not a lot because you don't want to overwhelm, but if they want to learn more. And again, that goes back to the ABCM of understanding how do you peak and then help them learn and explore. And then using visual management to track projects or track, like we talked about dashboards, we talked about that pie diagram, whatever you can do, MDI boards, manage daily improvement boards, whiteboards, virtual whiteboards, because now we're not all in the same workplace, but trying to figure out how do we create these so everybody, because when you use visual management, you're seeing, you're acting, and you're doing as a team. How do we bring everyone together so they understand what is happening and having that explicit empathy for everyone involved?
Great. I think that's awesome. And I think we can't forget the personal side, right? Make sure are you taking your breaks during the day? Are you leaving for lunch? Because we sign on at 6 a.m. and we're still on at 10 p.m. because I know for me, clients have kids, they want to meet late. So I think just letting them know that let them know as a human too, we know you need to take breaks. So let's say we did everything right, Christine, and we're going to take all this and everything's going to be awesome. But it just didn't work. So what do we do when it all fails?
Yeah. Into the book, we've used all the information and the wheels have fallen off the wagon. What happened? And I looked at where we've got like 5 minutes left. So I'm just going to do a very quick high level. And then we have a diagnostic and, what the symptom is and what is an antidote. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that's going to be in the playbook. But just as a quick, how are we doing? There's knowing that there's no one easy solution. And sometimes we can really assess, we've done that cultural assessment. We think we know what's going on. And then we find out that, two large groups don't even talk to one another. The engineers and the researchers don't want any of the Big Bang Theory. Nobody wants to talk to anybody else. People think each other's inferior. The understanding change is a process. It requires hard work and planning and iterations, a lot of iterations in order to do that. And I think that's what's really important for us is learning professionals, organizational development people, coaches, mentors, guides, consultants, is to be able to connect with people and to help them to understand that it's okay, that if we faltered, it's fine. Have forgiveness, have grace with yourself. What have you learned? And then kind of redirect, buck up, buttercup. We're going to be able to do this and move forward. But I think it's really how we hold ourselves and how we coach our leaders to hold themselves when things don't go or how they're starting to feel. And when you create that level of trust in the organization, when you can tell, and we all know, we've all been in that, when yeah, it's just not, I'm not picking up what they're putting down. How am I going to, how do we take that chance? And if people feel like they can approach their leader and say, yeah, you guys said this, but this is what's happening line. I think one of the things is when you roll out a lean to an organization, a lean initiative, and people are just this is a way for them to let go of us. This is not a way to open capacity and bring people in. And you can tell them, but emotionally they're seeing something totally different. If you have people that are those informal leaders, and you've connected with those informal leaders and that change network, and you're constantly getting information back, you can make those adjustments. An organization that did that really well was Christiana Care, when they changed to their care, value model. Their values for their organization, they wanted to reassess and reevaluate who and what they are and where they are for their people. And they used those change agents, and they did this iterative process to make sure that everyone felt like they were part of the values. And their values, 2 values, love and excellence. Where love leads, excellence follows. Isn't that beautiful?
That's gorgeous. I love that. And I love Buck Up Buttercup.
And I like this, we love change. The only constant is change. Yes, that's so true. That is really so true. And I love, change is great. You start first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that some of the key things you're bringing up are exactly what we tried to reinforce with this webinar is you're not alone, right? Mm-hmm. And that we have lots of ways we can help each other in the community. Obviously, Ellen has lots of ways we'd love to help you as well, but it's just, it's hard and we need to do it together, and it's a process for sure. So we just have a few minutes left. We've captured a lot of great information. I want to reinforce that you're getting this playbook. All attendees are going to actually get this full playbook with all of the genius from Christina in it, plus all of the feedback and all of the things we've crowdsourced from you today. So thank you so much for that. It's all about the community and the collective recommendations, and we just can't thank you enough for your input. And again, it never stops here. So there's lots of ways to get in touch with us. So if you still have more input or you're listening to this as a recording, shoot over your comments. We'd love to hear them. Captured a lot of good ideas for future webinars, but please go to your chat window. We'd like to hear more. We definitely will do a follow-up one on the scarf and then possibly on the drama triangle. And I'm thinking because Christina was such a great, gracious, genius host or, resource today, that maybe we should start a whole series, Bars After Work, right? Since we can't actually be going to the bars, maybe we can all gather with Bars After Work. So let us know your thoughts on that. In closing, we just have a few housekeeping things, but Christina, let's shoot back to you for closing comments.
Great. And thank you it's funny when I tell people, try to give them how to spell my last name, I'll say BARSS. It's like you've gone to too many bars. Yes. So just really successful and navigate. I love that, build the bridge and get over it. I love that. That was fantastic. Thank you very much. Ensure that your change framework is understandable and easy to adopt. Ensure your organization has a change management tools readily, creating those toolkits. Some people talked about those toolkits. That's great. You want things at their fingertip. And even if you can put things that they can get on their phone, fantastic. And then over communicate, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them and tell them what you're going to tell them. Really focus on that emotional connection, whether it's onboarding people, because that's a change too, to, something like just recently happened with COVID-19, working from home or returning to work. How are the emotions and how are you meeting people where they are, creating that psychological safe environment? Lisa, bring it on home.
Okay, with that note, thank you so much for your time. We have lots of ways we'd love to connect with you. You'll be getting copies not only of the playbook, but the slides. And meanwhile, be well, stay safe, and try to laugh a little today. All right, enjoy. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Bars, so much. And in case anyone's still on, I forgot to thank Claire, Carrie, and Rich especially.
Thanks, Lisa.
I'm so sorry. I had